The red and blue lights were already flashing across my garage door when I heard my mom gasp behind me, sharp and scared, the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop instantly. I remember gripping my phone so tightly my fingers went numb, staring at two HOA security guards standing in front of a golf cart parked straight across my driveway. Bright orange cones were set up like barricades, arms crossed, clipboards in hand, like they were guarding a crime scene instead of blocking a medical emergency. My mom needed medical transport. This was real. This was urgent. And somehow, these people were telling us to wait. One of the guards didn't raise his voice or even look concerned. He just glanced at his clipboard and said, "Sir, this driveway is temporarily blocked for a violation review. You'll need to remain where you are." That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized the HOA wasn't just overbearing or petty anymore. They were dangerous, and what they chose to do next would end up costing them far more than they ever expected. Because every single minute they delayed my mom's pickup was recorded, documented, and later used to hold them accountable. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I live in a quiet, planned community called Willow Bend Estates, just outside the small town of Ridgewood Plains, Missouri. It is one of those neighborhoods that looks perfect from the outside. Trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, neat sidewalks, and a big wooden sign at the entrance promising peaceful community living. When I first bought the house, the homeowners association seemed harmless. Monthly newsletters about seasonal decorations, reminders to mow your lawn, notes about community barbecues, nothing that raised red flags. At the time, I honestly thought the HOA was just there to keep things organized. That changed when my mom, Elaine Carter, had to move in with me. Her health had been slowly declining for years, but things became more serious after a hospital stay that left her with ongoing heart issues and limited mobility. She could still smile and joke, but there were days when walking from the bedroom to the living room was exhausting for her. Doctors warned me that emergency medical transport might be needed at any time, so I did what I thought was responsible. I contacted the HOA, explained the situation in detail, and filed formal paperwork requesting reasonable accommodation for emergency access to my driveway. I filled out every form they sent. I provided medical documentation. I followed up with emails and phone calls. Eventually, I received written confirmation stating that emergency access accommodations were approved. I saved copies. I printed them out. I thought that meant the issue was settled. For a while, things stayed quiet. Then the HOA announced they were hiring a private security company. At first, I did not think much of it. The board claimed it was for community safety and rule enforcement consistency. But almost overnight, the entire atmosphere of Willow Bend Estates changed. Guards started patrolling day and night in golf carts. They wore uniforms. They carried clipboards. And they seemed to be looking for reasons to write tickets. Citations started appearing on windshields for the smallest things. Trash bins visible for too long. Cars parked slightly too close to the curb. Decorative plants not listed on an approved landscaping sheet. It felt less like a neighborhood and more like a checkpoint. Then the notices started coming to me. At first, it was one violation letter every couple of weeks, then every week. Most of them were petty. Some of them were completely inaccurate. One claimed my driveway was partially obstructed, even though nothing had changed. Another claimed unauthorized vehicle presence when my mom's visiting nurse had parked for less than 10 minutes. I appealed every single one. I documented everything. Dates, times, photos, copies of emails. And slowly, I started noticing a pattern that made my stomach turn. Every appeal that involved my driveway, access, or medical-related use was automatically denied. No explanation, no discussion, just a foreign letter saying the decision was final. I tried calling the HOA office. Voicemails went unanswered. Emails were ignored or met with one-line replies referencing policy. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived in a plain envelope, stamped and formal. According to the notice, my driveway was now under temporary access review due to an alleged easement dispute. There was no explanation of what that meant, no prior warning, no scheduled meeting, just a statement informing me that access restrictions could be enforced at the discretion of the HOA. I remember reading it twice, then a third time trying to make sense of it. An easement dispute? With who? Over what? I responded immediately. I wrote a long, detailed email explaining my mom's medical condition again. I reminded them of the previously approved accommodation. I attached doctor's notes. I even highlighted the part where emergency access was clearly mentioned. I asked for clarification. I asked for a meeting. I asked for confirmation that emergency medical vehicles would not be obstructed. Days passed, no response. I followed up, still nothing. Meanwhile, security guards started parking near my driveway more often. Sometimes, they would sit there for long stretches of time, watching, writing notes, pointing at the pavement like they were measuring something invisible. It made my mom nervous. She would look out the window and ask, "Are we in trouble?" I kept telling her everything was fine, that it was just HOA nonsense. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The HOA had stopped seeing us as people. To them, we were just a problem to control. And I was about to learn, in the worst possible way, just how far they were willing to go. The HOA's behavior did not slow down after that letter. It escalated, quickly and aggressively, like someone testing how far they could push before I broke. Security guards began lingering near my driveway for hours at a time. They would park their golf carts just close enough to feel intentional, engines idling, radios crackling. One afternoon, I came home from the pharmacy to find a cart positioned halfway across the driveway. When I asked the guard to move, he shrugged and said it was incidental and that I could still get around it if I tried. Another morning, I opened the front door and froze. Bright orange cones had been placed across the entrance to my driveway overnight. No notice, no explanation, just barriers. My mom watched from the couch, her face tight with worry, asking if we were being punished for something. I decided it was time to confront them directly. I attended the next HOA board meeting, sitting in a folding chair under harsh fluorescent lights, clutching a folder full of documentation. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly explained my mom's medical condition, the approved accommodations, and the increasing obstructions. I asked, plainly, why security was interfering with emergency access. The HOA president, Linda Hargreave, leaned back in her chair and smiled, not kindly, but politely cold. Then she said the words I will never forget. Medical needs don't override community procedures. The room went quiet. I felt my face burn. That sentence followed me home. It echoed in my head late at night. It changed the way I saw everything. This was not about rules anymore. This was about control. Still, I tried to do things the right way. I sent more emails. I mailed certified letters that required signatures. I called the HOA office repeatedly and logged every attempt. I even requested a neutral mediator, hoping someone reasonable could step in and de-escalate the situation. Nothing worked. Instead, I received a formal warning in the mail. According to the notice, any unauthorized emergency vehicle access to my driveway could result in fines and further enforcement action. Reading that line made my hands shake. How could emergency access be unauthorized? That was when fear turned into anger. My mom tried to stay calm, but I could see the stress wearing on her. She started asking me to keep the curtains closed. She stopped sitting near the front window. She told me she felt like she was in the way. Then came the morning. Everything collapsed. It was early, before sunrise. My mom woke me up clutching her chest, her breathing shallow and uneven. I knew immediately this was serious. I grabbed my phone and called for medical transport, giving the dispatcher our address and explaining her condition. I rushed outside to clear the driveway, and my heart dropped. 2 security guards were already there. Their golf cart was parked sideways, completely blocking the driveway. Cones were placed perfectly across the entrance, like they had been waiting for this moment. I ran up to them and told them my mom was having a medical emergency. I asked them to move. I begged. One of them looked uncomfortable. The other didn't. He told me they were following orders and that the driveway was under access review. He said they could not move until instructed otherwise. I remember looking back at the house, knowing my mom was inside struggling to breathe, and realizing the HOA had crossed a line they could never uncross. And as the minutes ticked by, I understood something else too. This was no longer just a dispute. This was going to be a fight. When the guards refused to move, something in my brain clicked from panic into focus. If they were going to stand there and block a medical emergency, then I was going to make sure every second of it was documented. I pulled out my phone and hit record. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I asked for their names. I asked for badge numbers. I asked who gave the order. I asked for the exact time they began blocking the driveway. Then I asked them very clearly to repeat their refusal on camera. One of the guards shifted his weight and avoided looking at me. He kept glancing toward the house, like he knew this was wrong. The other guard stood stiff and professional, eyes forward, like he had practiced this exact moment. "Yes," he said, loud enough for the camera. "We are instructed by the HOA not to allow vehicle movement during active violations." I asked him to clarify what kind of violation justified blocking a medical pickup. He repeated the same line. That was the mistake, because in that moment, it stopped being a disagreement. It stopped being a gray area. Blocking emergency medical access is not just heartless, it is illegal. And they had just admitted it on video. I kept recording as I called the dispatcher back and explained the situation. I told them the driveway was blocked by private security. I told them my mom's condition was worsening. I told them we needed help now. When the paramedics arrived, they had to park down the street. I ran to meet them, explaining everything as fast as I could while one of them grabbed equipment. They saw the cones. They saw the guards. They saw the golf cart parked like a wall. They did not look impressed. One paramedic asked the guards why the driveway was blocked. The guards repeated the same explanation about active violations. The paramedic shook his head and told them they were interfering with emergency services. They wrote things down. They took photos. They noted the time. Every minute felt like an hour. Inside the house, my mom was struggling. The paramedics moved quickly once they got to her, but I could see the frustration on their faces. This delay never should have happened. It did not need to happen. As they stabilized her and prepared to transport her, one of the paramedics pulled me aside. His voice was calm but serious. "You're going to want copies of our report," he said quietly. That sentence hit me harder than anything else that morning, because until then, I had felt alone. Like this was just me versus an HOA that had too much power and too little empathy. But now, there were official reports, witnesses, documentation from emergency professionals whose job it is to know when something crosses a legal line. After my mom was taken to the hospital, I stood in the driveway staring at the cones, the guards, the golf cart. The adrenaline wore off, replaced by a cold clarity. I replayed the video, their words, their refusal, their tone. This was evidence. I started gathering everything. I backed up the video to multiple places. I wrote down the exact timeline while it was still fresh in my mind. I noted when the guards arrived, when I asked them to move, when the paramedics arrived, and how long the delay lasted. Neighbors had come outside during the commotion. A few of them had been recording too. One woman quietly handed me her phone number and said she saw everything. For the first time since this started, I did not feel powerless. The HOA thought they were enforcing rules. In reality, they had documented their own misconduct. They had turned a petty power struggle into a serious legal problem. And as I stood there watching the guards finally move their cart, far too late to matter, I knew this was the turning point. This was no longer just my word against theirs. This was proof. After that morning, I stopped waiting for the HOA to do the right thing. I moved fast, because I knew delays were exactly how they operated. The first thing I did was file a formal complaint with the county, laying out everything that had happened in clear, factual detail. I attached the video. I included the paramedic report. I listed names, times, and actions. Then I filed another complaint with the state agency that oversees homeowners associations and disability accommodations. That still did not feel like enough, so I contacted a civil rights attorney. I expected a long process. I expected skepticism. Instead, the attorney watched the video once, then asked me to replay the part where the guard said he was instructed not to allow vehicle movement. When it finished, the attorney leaned back and said, "They have a serious problem." Over the next few days, I learned just how big that problem was. The HOA had violated multiple laws, not just one or two gray area policies, but clear, well-established regulations. Disability accommodation statutes, emergency access protections, state-level rules that explicitly prohibit private entities from interfering with medical services. On top of that, they had ignored their own bylaws, which required immediate clearance for emergency vehicles regardless of any ongoing disputes. It got worse. The private security company the HOA hired was not licensed to enforce traffic restrictions or block residential access. They were authorized to observe and report, not obstruct. Everything those guards had done that morning was outside their legal authority. That opened the door to records requests. Through formal requests and legal channels, we obtained security footage from the neighborhood cameras, time logs from the guards' patrol schedules, incident reports that never should have existed, email chains between board members, internal notes discussing my property and my mom's condition. Reading through those documents made my blood run cold. They knew. Every step of the way, they knew exactly what they were doing. There were emails acknowledging my accommodation approval, messages referencing my mom's medical needs, discussions about how to limit access without setting precedent. One board member even expressed concern about potential liability, only to be dismissed by the HOA president. Then we found the email. It was short, casual, sent from Linda Hargreave to another board member and the security supervisor. No legal language, no hesitation. Let the delay teach him compliance. I remember staring at that sentence, reading it over and over again, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not an accident. This was intentional. They had decided that causing a delay during a medical emergency was an acceptable way to enforce obedience. That single line changed everything. Up until that point, the HOA could pretend this was about rules and procedures. That email stripped away the mask. It showed motive. It showed intent. And it showed a complete disregard for human safety. The attorney said it was one of the most damaging pieces of evidence we could have asked for. Once the complaints reached the county and state offices, the tone shifted quickly. Investigators started calling. Follow-up questions came in, requests for additional documentation. The paramedic report alone triggered mandatory reviews, but combined with the video and the internal emails, it became impossible for the HOA to brush this aside. Meanwhile, the HOA went silent. No more warning letters. No more emails citing policy. The guards stopped parking near my driveway altogether. It was like they suddenly realized the ground beneath them was unstable. My mom was still recovering, and I spent long hours at the hospital replaying everything in my head. The anger never fully left, but it sharpened into something more focused. This was not just about what they did to us. This was about stopping them from doing it to anyone else. By the end of that week, my attorney told me to prepare for a confrontation, because when organizations like this get exposed, they do not apologize quietly. They either double down or they collapse. And the HOA was about to be forced to choose. The confrontation happened at the very next HOA meeting, and this time I did not walk in alone. I walked in with a lawyer. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, the same beige room with folding chairs and a long table at the front where the board members sat like they were used to being untouchable. Conversation stopped the moment we stepped through the door. You could feel it, that sudden shift when people realize something serious is about to happen. Linda Hargreave was already seated at the center of the table. She glanced up, saw the attorney beside me, and her confident smile faded just a little. We sat down without saying a word. When the meeting officially started, Linda launched into the usual agenda items, trying to keep things normal. Budget updates, landscaping contracts, a reminder about parking rules. I let her talk. I waited. When the floor opened for homeowner comments, my attorney stood up. He introduced himself and stated, calmly and clearly, that he was representing me and my mother regarding an incident involving emergency medical interference. The room went completely silent. Even the people who usually whispered to each other stopped moving. Without any drama, the attorney connected a laptop to the screen at the front of the room. Then he pressed play. The video filled the room. My voice. The guards' voices. The words, instructed not to allow vehicle movement. You could hear the panic in my voice as I explained my mom's condition. You could see the cones, the golf cart, the refusal. Some board members shifted uncomfortably. Others stared straight ahead. Next came the audio from the dispatcher call. Then the paramedic statements, timestamps, notes documenting the obstruction and delay, photos taken by emergency personnel showing the blocked driveway. Linda tried to speak. The attorney held up his hand without looking at her. "Please do not interrupt," he said. She opened her mouth again. He repeated it, slower this time. She closed it. Then came the emails. Printed copies were passed down the table. Highlighted sections. Names. Dates. My attorney read key lines out loud, including references to my mom's medical accommodation and internal discussions about limiting access. When he read Linda's email, "Let the delay teach him compliance," the room visibly changed. A few people gasped. One board member looked like he might actually stand up and leave. Linda started to protest, saying the message was taken out of context. She was shut down immediately. The attorney explained, in a calm and almost conversational tone, exactly what the HOA was facing. He broke it down piece by piece: civil liability for disability discrimination, penalties for interfering with emergency services, breach of their own governing documents, exposure for every board member who participated or failed to intervene. Then he explained the part that hit hardest: liability per minute. Every minute my mom was delayed from receiving medical care carried measurable legal risk. Each minute added damages. Each minute compounded responsibility. Each minute was documented by emergency responders. The attorney let that sink in. He explained that this was not hypothetical. Complaints had already been filed with the county and the state. Investigations were underway. The security company's licensing was being reviewed. And if the matter went to court, the evidence would be presented exactly as the board had just seen it. No raised voices. No threats, just facts. By the time he finished, the board looked shaken. Linda sat rigid in her chair, her hands clenched. The authority she usually carried into meetings was gone. In its place was something closer to fear. For the first time since this started, the power balance in that room had shifted. The HOA had spent months trying to intimidate me into compliance. Now they were the ones being confronted, and they knew they were in serious trouble. The shift did not take long. Less than 48 hours after that meeting, my attorney received a call from the HOA's legal counsel. The tone was nothing like the letters and warnings I had been getting for months. There was no talk of violations or procedures anymore. There were no threats of fines, just careful, measured questions about resolution and moving forward. The HOA folded. The first thing they did was terminate the private security contract, effective immediately. No waiting period, no excuses. The guards vanished from the neighborhood almost overnight, along with their golf carts, cones, and clipboards. It was as if they had never been there at all. A few days later, Linda Hargreave resigned. There was no announcement, no explanation to the community. Just a short notice posted on the HOA bulletin board stating that she was stepping down for personal reasons. Everyone knew the truth. Word spreads fast in a neighborhood like ours, and people had seen the video by then. They had read the reports. They knew exactly why she was gone. Then came the settlement. The HOA agreed to cover all of my mom's medical expenses related to the delay, every hospital bill, every follow-up appointment. They paid legal fees in full. They paid damages for emotional distress and unlawful interference. The number was significant enough that the board approved it in a closed session without debate. But that was not the part that mattered most to me. The real justice came from the county. After reviewing the complaints, the video, and the paramedic documentation, county officials issued formal findings against the HOA. They were fined for interfering with emergency medical services. They were cited for violating disability accommodation requirements, and most importantly, they were permanently restricted from enforcing any rule that could impact emergency access. That authority was taken away from them entirely. From that point on, the HOA was prohibited from blocking, limiting, or even questioning emergency vehicle access under any circumstances. They could not delegate it to security. They could not review it. They could not touch it, period. The ruling was sent to every board member in writing. Watching that power disappear was surreal. This HOA had operated for years like they were above accountability. They relied on fear, silence, and intimidation. But the moment their actions were exposed to real oversight, everything collapsed. Neighbors started coming forward with their own stories. Improper fines, harassment, threats over minor issues, things they had been afraid to challenge until now. The board was forced to open additional reviews, and more policies were quietly rolled back. As for Linda, she disappeared from community life entirely. No meetings, no emails, no appearances. The person who once told me that medical needs did not override community procedures was suddenly nowhere to be found. Standing in my driveway one evening, watching the sunset without cones or guards in sight, I felt something I had not felt in months. Relief. Not just because we won, but because the system that hurt us had finally been stopped. The HOA thought they were teaching me compliance. Instead, they taught themselves a lesson they will never forget. My mom recovered slowly, but she recovered. That was what mattered most to me. The doctor said the delay could have made things much worse, but thankfully, she got the care she needed in time. When she finally came home, the house felt lighter, like we could breathe again. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the street felt without security carts rolling by every hour. Not long after everything settled, the county came out and officially marked our driveway as protected emergency access. Bright, clear markings. Written confirmation. Permanent documentation filed with the county and the HOA. There was no more review, no more interpretation, no room for abuse. Emergency access was non-negotiable, and everyone knew it. What surprised me most was what happened next. Neighbors started reaching out. Some knocked on my door, others stopped me while I was outside. A few sent quiet messages saying they had seen what happened and wanted to thank me for standing up. Then the story started coming out. One neighbor had been fined for calling an ambulance too often for her husband. Another said security once delayed a fire truck over a parking dispute. Someone else admitted they had paid thousands in fines over rules that were never actually in the bylaws. People had been scared to speak up. Seeing the HOA finally held accountable changed that. Within a month, the board looked completely different. Multiple members resigned, citing stress and personal reasons. A special election was held, and new board members were voted in. People who actually lived in the community and cared about it. People who listened. One of the first things the new board did was review past enforcement actions. Dozens of fines were overturned. Policies were rewritten in plain language. Security enforcement was removed entirely, replaced with a simple reporting system for real safety concerns only. No golf carts, no cones, no intimidation. For the first time since I moved in, Willow Bend Estates felt like a neighborhood instead of a pressure cooker. My mom started sitting by the front window again. She smiled more. She joked about how quiet it was. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "I finally feel safe here." That sentence meant more to me than any settlement or ruling ever could. The neighbors who had once avoided eye contact started waving. Kids rode bikes in the street again. People actually talked to each other at the mailbox. It felt like the community had woken up from a long, tense nightmare. I kept thinking back to that morning. The cones, the guards, the clipboard, the way they treated a medical emergency like a compliance lesson. It still made my chest tighten. But now, it also reminded me of something important. Power only works when people are afraid to challenge it. The HOA had relied on silence, on people assuming they had no choice, on residents believing that rules mattered more than humanity. Once that illusion broke, everything changed. I did not set out to take down an HOA, I just wanted my mom to be safe. But standing up for her ended up protecting a lot of other people too. Now, when I pull into my driveway, there is nothing blocking it. No cones, no guards, no clipboards, just a clear path home. And for the first time in a long time, Willow Bend Estates finally feels like what it was always supposed to be, a place to live, not a threat hanging over your head. I still think about that morning more often than I would like. About how quickly things can spiral when the wrong people are given unchecked authority. About how close we came to something going terribly wrong, all because someone decided rules mattered more than a human life. It is frightening how easily empathy disappears when power goes unchallenged. But I also learned something important through all of this. Documentation matters. Speaking up matters. Standing your ground matters, even when it feels uncomfortable or intimidating, especially then. No HOA, no board, no group of self-appointed rule enforcers is above the law, no matter how confidently they act. What happened to us could have happened to anyone. And that is why I chose to share this story. Not for revenge. Not for attention. But because silence is exactly what allows situations like this to keep happening. If telling our experience helps even one family question an unfair demand, push back against dangerous behavior, or protect a loved one during an emergency, then every stressful moment was worth it. My mom is safe now. Our neighborhood is better now, and the people who abused their authority no longer have it. That is the kind of ending I hold on to when I think back on everything we went through. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?